There's a version of you that got left behind somewhere along the way, buried under layers of expectations, molded by others' needs, shaped by a world that rewarded conformity over authenticity. Carl Jung spent his life helping people excavate this lost self, and what he discovered will shake you to your core. You are not who you think you are, and the person you were meant to become is still waiting to be found. Jung made a startling observation about human development. Somewhere between childhood and adulthood, most people lose themselves so completely that they spend the rest of their lives living as strangers to their own souls. He called this lost aspect of personality the abandoned self, the authentic core that gets buried under societal conditioning, family expectations, and the relentless pressure to fit in. Think about who you were as a child before the world told you who you should be. What did you love without needing reasons? What fascinated you before you learned what was practical? What dreams did you have before you were taught to be realistic? That child, curious, spontaneous, unafraid of their own desires, represents your lost self. And Jung believed that finding your way back to this authentic core was the most important journey you could ever undertake. The tragedy begins early. From the moment we're born, we're subjected to what Jung called collective conditioning, the systematic process by which society shapes us into acceptable citizens. Well-meaning parents, teachers, and institutions gradually train us out of our natural impulses and into prescribed roles. The creative child learns to prioritize grades over imagination. The sensitive child learns to toughen up. The wildly curious child learns to ask fewer questions. Layer by layer, year by year, we construct what Jung termed a provisional personality, a self that meets external expectations but has little to do with our true nature. We become who we think we should be rather than who we actually are. And the saddest part? We often do this so successfully that we forget there was ever an original self to lose. Jung observed that this abandonment of the authentic self creates a profound psychological wound. People achieve external success, fulfill social roles, check all the boxes that society deems important, yet feel fundamentally empty inside. They experience what he called the problem of the unlived life. The haunting sense that their real existence is happening somewhere else, lived by someone else. You've probably felt this yourself, that nagging sense that you're living someone else's script, playing a role you never auditioned for. The successful professional who feels dead inside, the dutiful parent who's lost all sense of personal identity, the people pleaser who can't remember the last time they expressed a genuine preference. These aren't moral failings, they're symptoms of self-abandonment. But Jung discovered something remarkable. The lost self never truly disappears. It goes underground, continuing to live in the unconscious, sending up signals through dreams, symptoms, and sudden inexplicable longings. The midlife crisis is not a breakdown. It's a breakthrough attempt by the lost self to reclaim its rightful place in your conscious life. The question that can change everything is this: what if the dissatisfaction you feel is not a sign that something's wrong with your life, but a sign that something authentic is trying to be born? Perhaps right now you're feeling that familiar ache, the one that says, "This isn't really me." The one that whispers late at night when the world is quiet and your defenses are down. You're not alone in this experience. You're part of a vast community of people who gave up pieces of themselves along the way and are now trying to figure out how to get them back. Jung understood that the search for the lost self is simultaneously the most natural and most terrifying journey a human being can undertake. It's natural because your authentic self is your birthright. It's who you were before the world taught you to be someone else. But it's terrifying because finding your lost self often means disappointing the people who've grown comfortable with your adapted self. Imagine the woman who spent 40 years being the perfect wife and mother, never expressing a need that might inconvenience others. When she finally starts honoring her own desires, some people will call her selfish. Or consider the man who built a successful career in a field he never loved, following a path laid out by family expectations. When he finally pursues his true calling, some will say he's having a breakdown. But Jung would say these aren't breakdowns, they're breakouts. The lost self often makes itself known through what Jung called symptoms, not just physical ailments, but psychological signals that something essential is being ignored. The chronic fatigue that has no medical cause might be your authentic self's way of saying, stop living this lie. The depression that seems to come from nowhere might be grief for the life you're not living. The anxiety about the future might be your soul as way of protesting a path that isn't yours. Jung noticed that people often experience the call of the lost self as a crisis because it threatens the carefully constructed identity they've spent years building. The thought of dismantling this false self, even though it's causing suffering, feels like psychological death. And in a sense, it is. Something must die for something more authentic to be born. But here's what Jung discovered that changes everything. The lost self doesn't want to destroy your life. It wants to make it worth living. Every aspect of yourself that you've abandoned continues to carry gifts, talents, and perspectives that could enrich your existence beyond measure. The question is whether you're brave enough to go looking for them. This isn't about throwing away everything you've built or abandoning your responsibilities. It's about excavating the authentic motivations, desires, and qualities that have been buried under layers of conditioning. It's about asking not, what should I do, but what do I actually want? Not what's expected of me, but what's true for me. If you're feeling that stirring of recognition, that sense that something important has been lost and needs to be found, then your journey back to wholeness has already begun. Subscribe to continue this exploration, because what we're about to uncover next will show you exactly how to begin the most important archaeological dig of your life, the excavation of your own authentic self. Now we reach the heart of Jung's revolutionary approach to psychological healing, the method he called individuation, the process of becoming who you actually are instead of who you've been programmed to be. This isn't self-help rhetoric. It's a precise psychological technology for recovering your lost self and integrating it into your conscious life. Jung discovered that the lost self leaves what he called breadcrumbs throughout your life, clues that point toward your authentic nature. These breadcrumbs appear in your spontaneous interests, your childhood fascinations, your recurring dreams, and even your seemingly irrational aversions. Learning to read these signals is like developing an internal GPS that can guide you back home to yourself. Start by paying attention to your energy. Jung observed that when people align with their authentic nature, they experience what he called psychic energy, a sense of vitality and aliveness that can't be manufactured through willpower alone. What activities, conversations, or environments leave you feeling more energized rather than drained? What pursuits cause you to lose track of time? These are breadcrumbs leading toward your lost self. Equally important are your resistances, the things you find yourself avoiding, not because they're difficult, but because they're not you. Jung would ask, according to whom? Often our strongest resistances point toward aspects of ourselves that we've been taught to reject. The practical person's resistance to creativity, the nice person's resistance to conflict, the rational person's resistance to intuition. These resistances often guard the very qualities your lost self most needs to reclaim. Jung developed a practice he called active imagination, consciously engaging with the figures, images, and energies that emerge from your unconscious. This might involve writing dialogues with different aspects of yourself, exploring the characters that appear in your dreams, or simply sitting quietly and asking your lost self what it needs to feel safe enough to emerge. One of the most powerful questions Jung taught people to ask themselves was, what unlived life am I carrying? What dreams did you abandon? What parts of yourself did you sacrifice for acceptance? What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail and no one would judge you? These aren't idle fantasies. They're archaeological tools for uncovering buried aspects of your authentic self. Jung also emphasized the importance of what he called holding space for paradox. Your lost self often contains qualities that seem to contradict your adapted personality. The serious professional might discover they're naturally playful. The independent person might find they deeply crave connection. The gentle soul might realize they have a fierce protective instinct. The goal isn't to choose one side or the other, but to expand your sense of self to include both. Another crucial element of reclaiming your lost self is learning to distinguish between guilt and regret. Guilt says, I am bad for wanting this. Regret says, I'm sad I didn't honor this part of myself sooner. Jung observed that guilt often signals conditioning that needs to be questioned, while regret often signals authentic desires that need to be honored. The process of individuation also requires what Jung called differentiating from the collective. Learning to separate your authentic values, desires, and opinions from those you've absorbed from your family, culture, and peer group. This doesn't mean rejecting everything you've learned, but rather consciously choosing what truly resonates with your core self and what you've simply accepted without question. But here's the secret that makes all the difference between people who successfully reclaim their lost self and those who remain forever searching. Here's Jung's most profound discovery. Your lost self isn't lost at all. It's been waiting. Every day of your life, through every compromise and adaptation, your authentic self has been patiently holding space for your return. It doesn't hold grudges for the years you ignored it. It doesn't punish you for the choices you made to survive. It simply waits, ready to embrace you the moment you're ready to come home. Jung realized that the lost self operates on what he called Kairos time, the time of readiness and ripeness rather than Chronos time, the mechanical time of clocks and calendars. This means your authentic self emerges not when you force it, but when you create the internal conditions that make it feel safe to appear. These conditions include self-compassion, patience, and the willingness to be imperfect while you're learning to be real. The most shocking revelation Jung encountered in his work was that people's lost selves often contain exactly the qualities they most need to solve their current life problems. The burned-out executive who rediscovers their artistic nature finds new sources of creativity for their work. The people-pleaser who reclaims their capacity for healthy selfishness discovers they can actually be more generous from a place of choice rather than compulsion. The anxious perfectionist who embraces their messy, spontaneous side finds unexpected peace. This isn't coincidence. It's the psyche's inherent wisdom. Jung believed that our authentic selves contain an intelligence that our adapted selves lack. Your lost self has been observing your life from the unconscious, taking notes, developing solutions, waiting for the moment when you're ready to listen. When you finally turn toward it with genuine curiosity, it often has exactly the medicine you've been seeking. But Jung discovered something even more remarkable. The moment you begin genuinely seeking your lost self, it begins seeking you back. Synchronicities multiply. Opportunities appear. People who resonate with your authentic nature show up in your life. Books fall off shelves open to exactly the page you need to read. It's as if the universe itself conspires to support your return to wholeness. This happens because, according to Jung, when you align with your authentic nature, you align with what he called the self, the deeper organizing principle of your psyche that knows exactly who you're meant to become. The self has been orchestrating your entire life, even during the years when you felt most lost, creating exactly the experiences you need to eventually find your way back home. So here we arrive at the most beautiful truth Jung ever uncovered. You are not broken, and you were never broken. You are simply a whole person who got convinced you were only allowed to show certain parts of yourself to the world. Your lost self isn't lost. It's been in protective custody, waiting for the day when it would be safe to emerge. The journey back to wholeness isn't about fixing yourself or overcoming your limitations. It's about excavating the magnificent being you've always been underneath the layers of conditioning, expectation, and adaptation. It's about remembering that you came into this world as a complete person, with a unique contribution to make, and that this essential you is still there, still intact, still ready to live. Jung taught us that individuation, becoming who you really are, is not a luxury or a self-indulgent pursuit. It's a moral imperative. The world needs what only you can give, but you can't give it while you're pretending to be someone else. Your authentic self carries gifts, perspectives, and contributions that no one else can offer. By finding your lost self, you're not just healing your own life. You're offering healing to the world. This doesn't mean the journey is easy. Reclaiming your authentic self often requires disappointing people who've grown comfortable with your adapted version. It means setting boundaries you've never set, pursuing interests others might not understand, and sometimes making choices that don't make sense to anyone but you. But Jung would remind you, your first responsibility is not to be who others want you to be, but to be who you actually are. Remember that your lost self has been with you all along, speaking to you through your dreams, your yearnings, your moments of unexpected joy, and yes, even your symptoms and struggles. Every part of your experience has been trying to guide you back to yourself. You just needed to learn the language it was speaking. If this exploration has awakened something in you, if you felt that deep recognition of, yes, this is what I've been searching for, then your lost self is already beginning to emerge. Like this video, if it resonated with your journey, subscribe to continue exploring these pathways to wholeness, and share this message with someone who might be ready to stop searching outside themselves and start excavating the treasure that's been buried within them all along. Because in the end, Jung discovered the most liberating truth of all. You don't need to become someone new to be happy. You need to become who you've always been. Your lost self is not lost. It's just been waiting for you to remember that it was there all along, holding the key to the life you've always wanted to live.